Chapter 1: The Rise of a Financial Titan. John Pierpont Morgan was born in 1837 into a world of privilege. His father, Junius Spencer Morgan, was already a successful banker, setting the foundation for his son's future. Young Pierpont was educated in the finest institutions, studying in Europe, where he developed a sharp understanding of global finance. But J.P. Morgan was not just any banker. He had vision, and more importantly, he had power. The power to command industries, the power to negotiate deals, and the power to bend economies to his will. In 1861, Morgan began his career in banking. He joined Duncan, Sherman and Company, but it was in 1871 that his true journey began when he co-founded Drexel, Morgan and Company, a firm that would eventually become the legendary J.P. Morgan and Company. Chapter 2: The Railroad Conquests. As the 19th century roared on, America was expanding, and so was its greatest innovation, the railroad. But expansion required capital, and capital required control. J.P. Morgan became the master of consolidating railroads, ensuring efficiency, eliminating competition, and, most importantly, increasing profits. Morgan orchestrated one of the most significant financial restructurings in history, consolidating major railroads like the Erie Railroad, the Northern Pacific, and eventually creating the modern-day General Electric through financial wizardry. But his power did not go unnoticed. The American people began to whisper, was one man controlling too much? The whispers grew louder as Morgan continued his reign over industry. Chapter 3: Saving the U.S. Economy. By the 1890s, J.P. Morgan was more than a banker. He was America's financial savior. In 1895, the United States Treasury was on the brink of collapse. Gold reserves had plummeted, and confidence in the dollar was wavering. In an unprecedented move, J.P. Morgan stepped in, personally arranging a bailout of $65 million in gold to stabilize the economy. For the first time in history, a private banker had more influence than the U.S. government itself. Chapter 4: The Birth of Corporate America. Morgan wasn't just a banker, he was an empire builder. He had a grand vision: industries should not compete, they should consolidate. The stronger should absorb the weaker, creating corporate giants that would dominate markets. His greatest triumph? The creation of U.S. Steel in 1901, the first billion-dollar corporation in history. With a simple handshake deal, Morgan acquired Andrew Carnegie's steel empire for $480 million, equivalent to over $15 billion today. Morgan had done the impossible. He had built America's corporate future with a single stroke of a pen. Chapter 5: The Panic of 1907. In 1907, the U.S. faced another financial crisis. Stock markets were crashing, banks were failing, and panic gripped Wall Street. The government looked to one man, J.P. Morgan. Morgan summoned the nation's top bankers to his library on Madison Avenue. He locked the doors, refusing to let anyone leave until a solution was found. After hours of negotiations, Morgan orchestrated a bailout that saved the banking system, preventing a total economic collapse. Once again, one man had more power than the government itself. Chapter 6: The Rise of Regulation. With great power comes great scrutiny. By the early 20th century, J.P. Morgan had become a symbol of financial dominance, and the U.S. government took notice. In 1912, he was called to testify before Congress during the Pujo Committee hearings, accused of monopolistic control over America's financial system. His response? A man always has two reasons for doing anything, a good reason and the real reason. Morgan's testimony revealed the extent of his influence, but it also paved the way for financial regulations that would shape modern banking. The Federal Reserve was established in 1913, ensuring that no single banker would ever again wield such immense power. Chapter 7: The End of an Era. J.P. Morgan passed away in 1913, leaving behind a legacy of unparalleled influence. He had reshaped American industry, stabilized its economy, and built financial empires that still stand today. but he was also a controversial figure. To some, he was a ruthless monopolist who crushed competition. To others, he was a necessary force that stabilized an unpredictable economy. Regardless of how history remembers him, one thing is undeniable, JP. Morgan didn't just own America's wealth. For a time, he owned America itself. Chapter 8: Legacy and Impact. Today, the world of finance still operates on principles Morgan pioneered. His legacy lives on in every bank, every merger, and every deal that shapes the modern economy. He was more than a banker. He was a king without a crown, a ruler without a throne. He was J.P. Morgan, the man who owned America. Chapter 9: The man behind the power. Beyond his business empire, Morgan was an avid art collector, amassing a collection that would later form the foundation of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He surrounded himself with the world's finest paintings, sculptures, and manuscripts, reinforcing the idea that he was not just a financier, but also a patron of culture and knowledge. Despite his immense power, he was not universally admired. Workers feared his monopolies, politicians questioned his influence, and journalists criticized his tactics. Yet, those who knew him personally described a man of intelligence, determination, and an unshakable confidence in his own abilities. Morgan's physical presence was as imposing as his financial dominance. With piercing eyes and a face marked by rosacea, he carried an air of authority wherever he went. His presence alone could intimidate businessmen into agreement, and his words could move markets overnight. Chapter 10: The Morgan Influence Today. The world Morgan helped shape still exists today. The banking system he reinforced, the corporate structures he built, and the financial mechanisms he pioneered continue to impact modern economies. J.P. Morgan Chase, the institution that bears his name, remains one of the most powerful banks in the world, carrying forward his legacy of financial control and influence. Though the financial world has evolved, the idea of a single entity wielding vast power over economies is not a relic of the past. From tech moguls to hedge fund giants, the spirit of J.P. Morgan lives on in those who seek to shape markets, dictate corporate destinies, and consolidate power on an unprecedented scale. His influence is undeniable, his power was unparalleled, and his legacy remains imprinted on the foundation of modern America. Chapter 11: The Lessons of J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan's life teaches a powerful lesson: control the money, and you control the world. He understood that wealth wasn't just about numbers, it was about influence, leverage, and the ability to shape industries. His methods were ruthless but effective. Today, as new financial empires rise, the tactics Morgan used are still in play. The importance of strategic alliances, market consolidation, and financial foresight remain crucial for those who seek to dominate the economic landscape. J.P. Morgan wasn't just a man of his time, he was a man ahead of it. His blueprint for financial success continues to guide the titans of industry today, proving that his lessons are as relevant now as they were a century ago.